It's a town I love and hate at the same time. I've done it 36 plus years now. And this past 2 years have tested my mettle. I've never seen a town just not perform. There should be a revolt, to tell you the truth. I'm an equal opportunity finger pointer that you'll see in the political parties. Frankly, I wish we had a third one. This is what people are beginning to tell me. They wish they had a third party to vote for. You're going to hear a lot of attitude and analysis, because I've learned in my many speeches throughout this great country, that's what people need. You don't need 50-50 choices, okay? My first boss at Pro Farmer was Merrill Oster, and he taught us early on if we ever answered 50-50, he'd fire us. So it's either 51 or 49. You're going to get conclusions. I frequently say I know when I'm right, but I don't know when I'm wrong. So my email is my last name at gmail.com. If you didn't get a question asked that you wanted to have at me. Now, as far as Washington itself, Obama, you know, first the serious side and then a little joke. The serious side, I will tell you, as a history major many years ago, and actually I keep reading history, we have a I wish I wouldn't have to say this, but we have a relatively weak president and a dysfunctional Congress. That's not the makings of a good scenario. History shows that countries test you in that environment. So I hope leaders begin to lead, both political parties and the White House. Obama's, he had a bad year last year. But to put perspective on it, I'm going to Lethbridge, Canada, and that's hard to get to from here, let me tell you. I get there about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to tell the Canadians that Obama, his approval ratings are so bad that the mayor of Toronto has a higher approval rating than Obama. Now, that's the best perspective I can put. As low as his approval ratings are, your Congress in the nation's capital is even worse. 9%. And I thought to myself, who are those 9%? You know? The spouses, the grandparents in some cases, and I can get it down. And then I thought, oh yeah, I have to add in the mistresses. So that gets us down to about 4%. Now at Informa, we're all a bunch of economists and analysts, so I thought, well, 4% approval rating, that gave me to estimate there's about 4% of the American public are just crazy. So I'm content now. I still respect our nation's capital. Government is still people. I still get a chill when I go the Truman balcony side of the White House. That's a true story. Government, limited government, is needed. My father was a very successful businessman, but he taught me that you still need some regulations, not what you're going to be getting the next 3 years from what will become the regulatory president of the United States. You haven't seen anything yet. I hope I'm wrong there, but the regulations are first to come. But with that respect involved, wherever I go, people told me to put in a chart that reflects their current frustration with Washington right now, and here's what I came up with, okay? This is the Three Stooges. That's the Senate Majority Leader, the President, and the Democratic House Speaker. That just gets it out of my system, okay? Now, the Republicans have been at the cliff for several years now. When it comes to Senate elections, they have the uncanny ability to put their foot in their mouth. When the subject of rape comes up, they should just shut up, you know. So maybe we'll see some balance in some of these elections coming up. But are we, I'm going to answer the question, is a dysfunctional Washington ever going to be able to function? We're seeing glimmers of that. You saw it the last few weeks with the budget agreement. But just look at Obama's second term to date. This is very common to a president's second term, be they a Democrat or a Republican. They just lose their glamour. They lose their focus. The health care reform, you know the rollout, charitably could be termed a debacle. And that's what you get when you have a multi-thousand-page bill approved at 3:15 in the morning, by the way, without one opposing party's vote. Now, the perspective I'm going to give you on that is you're going to see more unintended consequences. This thing's first starting. That's not to say that this country did not need health care reform. If you're anywhere near my age and you have parents or grandparents that you've had to go through the medical process, you know that there has to be reform. And I'm one of the 78 million, baby boomers that are going to attack our deficit in the years ahead. It's way lower now. Down 66% since Obama took office. This is what the White House will tell you. But once we start really retiring, those 78 million baby boomers is when that debt really starts going up for two reasons. Social Security, but the big one, Medicare. It'll bust the bank. And I'll get more into that later. Also, the health care reform is a good example to explain to you why the Republicans, especially in the House, want to go, they want an immigration reform bill, but not a comprehensive one right away, because they said, look what happened to health care reform. We want to go piecemeal, to first have the border security, then to go e-verify so agribusiness people know the immigrants they are hiring, are they here legally? If not, they get in trouble. They have to pay hefty fines. Then in agriculture, minimum 60% of all workers in U.S. agriculture are illegal immigrants. A lot of people don't know that. At least 60%. Meat processing, food industry, horticulture, dairy industry, etc. Think through it. So this has some linkage involved. We've gone through the intelligence, snafu with Snowden. That gets into the debate, how much should government know? Now, if you travel as much as I do outside of this country, I kiss the tarmac every time I come back, to tell you the truth. That's what they ought to do to every high school kid, is send them overseas. Then they'll learn. But I digress here. But when I go into countries, they're beginning to ask me, what's happening to your country? They still look upon us as the beacon of freedom, entrepreneurship, innovation, all that a lot is in your industry. I said, that has not gone away, but we're into this schism of uncivilness in your nation's capital. And some glimmers of change that I'll go through. Executive orders. I've never covered a president, and I've covered everyone since the waning days of President Nixon. I've never seen a president use executive orders as much as this one. And he's just beginning. He's going to do some executive orders in the next few months on renewable fuels, on wind energy, etc. He's going to do it on climate change. You're just seeing the beginning of this one. Usually presidents, Bush did it, Bush's father did it. The last 6 months of their term, they start this. He's beginning now. So just a warning there. I understand his frustration. He can't deal either with his own party or definitely the Republicans. It's at loggerheads. Regulations I've already talked enough about. Again, I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I am. They're going to come down hard on agriculture. Grain bin, regulations, dust, etc. in the meat processing area. Again, hope I'm wrong. I don't think I am. Farm Bill, I'll have a number of bottom lines for you, but in my 36 plus years in Washington, I have never seen a more frustrating experience of a farm bill than this one, primarily as a result of some national commodity groups of wanting too much, and not understanding there are regional, differences in this great country. So if that's max greed, some people are telling me, that's going to come back to hurt production agriculture sooner or later, because they're going to get after one of the few programs that work in agriculture, and that's crop insurance. That's low-hanging fruit. 63% of a buy-up policy is subsidized by taxpayers. That's going to be reduced in the years ahead. That's easy picking. Primarily as a result of what will happen the next few years. If prices of corn and soybeans go as low as my company thinks, by December this year, you're going to see December corn futures under $4. You're going to see November soybean futures, from what we know now, under $10. Your income outlays, your transfer payments from you all as taxpayers to corn and soybean growers are going to be huge, huge. So that will play out in the years ahead. Foreign policy issues. I could be right on every other subject I'm telling you right now and look stupid as a result of a geopolitical problem. Egypt, Syria, Iran, North Korea, etc. And it affects agriculture. You're in the meat industry, you know how important trade flows are for you. In many years, that's the difference between profit and loss. Or it maximizes your positive margins in some years. You've done a great job as an industry in pork exports. We're actually exporting up to 20% of certain dairy products now. But just think of two countries that keep me up as a political reporter the most: Israel and Iran. No country, including ours, can tell Israel what to do. So if Israel feels that Iran's going to get that nuclear weapon, they'll do something. And if that were to occur, you don't know. But it will increase cost and freight insurance for freighters into that sensitive Mideast area, and that will affect short-term any export scenarios. That's just to give you some things to think about at night so you don't go to bed, okay? What's wrong with Washington? In one slide I can tell you. It's my way or the highway. Both political parties want everything they want in a bill, what they want, and if they don't get it, they vote no. That's your lawmakers, including your own state senators, by the way, okay, who have changed. They just want it all. The best way I can explain this one, I had great parents, growing up. My father was one of 13 kids, good Catholic. He had 6 right in a row like ducks. And one day he put us all around a circular table, filled a glass half full of water, and had us comment on it. We all said different things, but we all asked him the same question: why didn't you fill that up? He was like a white man's Bill Cosby. He always had a story. He always learned. And he said, a glass half full is very good news because I remember when it was empty. He came through the Depression. So that's what's wrong with Washington. They don't understand that moderate policy anymore is probably the best you can get, and probably the best policy. We'll get back there. Our history shows that leaders eventually lead. How did we get here? This is the sign I wish they would put up right before Congress. If you hit this sign, you will hit that bridge. They need logic. I tell the smartest people, when you fly to Washington, D.C. and cross the Potomac, come in April. That's the best month. April, early May. And I know it's planning time and all that. It's where the cherry blossoms, etc. I still love the town. More tulips than in Kansas City, to tell you the truth. And I tell the smartest people I know, when you cross the Potomac, 1 + 1 on a good day equals 3. So it doesn't have to make sense. These are the rules I've learned in 36 years. I tell people when they go, don't they understand, blah, 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 and I just stop right there. You've made a mistake. It doesn't have to make sense. That's scary, okay? Now, where are we going? Is this road going to end in water? Are we going to buck up and get some leadership? And I see the glass half full as very good news, like my father. And there are some glimmers of hope. It may take an election or two from both parties to get the sign, but I see it changing because we're going to have to. From dysfunctional to functional. A couple of weeks ago, we had the first budget in many years, for this fiscal year that ends September 30th, a little over $1 trillion covering 12 departments of your government. Obama signed it Friday. And they even have the parameters for the fiscal year 2015 year that starts this October 1, but they have to fight over the details of that. But it's still a positive. You usually hear negatives. The debt limit hike, it ends February the 7th. They could go until March sometime before they up it again. And you'll have some arch conservative Republicans that want to play games again on that for money that's already spent, by the way. But I think the leadership in the Republican Party is starting to lead right now. And most of the arch conservatives have been, dethroned as a result of coming out against that fiscal year 2014 budget before it was even revealed what was in it. So they overplayed their hand. So the debt limit is going to be hiked. So I don't think we're going to have countdown to shut down again under the cable programs. By the way, I think you're far better off not to watch MSNBC or even Fox to a degree. Where do you get your news? Newspapers are still the better way, but they back into stories. But I think the more newspapers you read, probably the better off you're going to be. And CNN, I don't have the stomach to watch CNN. If you're in the meat industry, you probably don't like ABC News. I like Diane Sawyer, but my joke every day, I've got to watch them, okay? And my game I play is what catastrophe is ABC News going to start off each news program? And it's 70% of the time it's the weather. It's the weather. But just, do that test for me. Elections are going to put many issues on hold, and these are just a few. The financial sector reform that we went through in 2007 and 2008, when our system almost imploded, it was really, really bad. The Federal Reserve had to throw everything they could at it. Remember, that's when my 401k and a lot of 401ks went to 201ks, and now they're 501ks. I'll tell you, it's almost too good. I want a correction here. Believe it or not, it doesn't go straight up, Not like cattle prices are right now. Markets have to breathe. So you're going to see some financial reforms. Some people should have been thrown in jail and prison, etc., and they haven't been yet. People are still fomenting over this one. Energy sector, unbelievable mega changes that's happening in this great country. With the fracking, I was just out in North Dakota, both positives and negatives going on. The creation of wealth out there and in Pennsylvania, parts of Pennsylvania. It's just unbelievable, and this is just not a 1 or 3 year phenomenon. It'll go over a decade, the reserves. But what's going on in industry doesn't mean that your fertilizer prices, if you're a grower of corn, that doesn't mean they're going to go lower or much lower. It just means the top side won't be as high as it could be otherwise. I've learned to be very careful on forecasting fertilizer prices, let me tell you. But this is a prime example that shows what entrepreneurship and a little lack of regulation or reduced regulation can do to the private industry if given the chance. I was out in California, Monterey, and they told me they spend more money on prisons than education. That's California. I come from Southern Illinois originally. I can't believe the state anymore. They're tax heaven there. They've run all the transportation companies out of Illinois, and they're on to Indiana, which was far better run. And but Illinois, on a per-state basis, their debt is worse than California. And I told Illinois the last time I spoke there, by the way, that's an insult, And California told me about their fault in the Monterey area, just like Williston, North Dakota. But it's going to take more technology to get it, and it will come, to get it out. I said, just think, you Californians, you can go debt all over again in the next few decades. And watch, that'll happen too. Immigration, I've already talked enough about. It's going to happen, but the Republicans will not give amnesty, there's no other word for it, until after the 2016 presidential elections. They ain't going to give Obama that. But they'll come close to it, okay? Now, immigrants are something else. My father was an immigrant. This nation was. The immigrants, legal, has made this country younger than any other developed country. We're growing as a developed country. There's very few. Europe is going down. Russia is sinking in population, etc. That's one of the pluses. Another plus is 35% of the increase over the next decade in home ownership is going to come from immigrants. In the 1970s, they only made up 5.5%. So there, you think that's not going to help drive the economy? What about these young, kids coming out of college? Aren't they going to buy a farm? Aren't they? They want to buy a farm. Aren't they going to buy a home? Many cannot, because unlike in agriculture, where the parents probably helped them out a lot because they could, they're straddled with debt like you wouldn't believe. So it's going to take them a while. Are their parents or grandparents, bailing them out again just to buy a home? Just a little mega change that's going on in this great country. Regulatory oversight, again, if I've said it once, I'll say it 3 times. Hope I'm wrong, but here we go again. The regulatory albatross is going to come back at the industry people. Not that some regulations are not needed, but not what you're going to get. Trade agreements. This will impact the hog industry. Usually commodity groups oversell trade agreements. That's what another lesson I've learned. It's not that they're bad, they're usually very good. And other countries are inking trade agreements to give them the opportunity to get market access. So any trade agreement can't guarantee you increased exports, it just gives you a better chance. That's about the best thing you can say about doing new trade agreements. Now, the most current one is the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. A Mexican ministry official said just the other day that he thinks that it will be agreed to no later than this April. Okay? And that will be a potential positive, especially anything protein. And this conference is about protein. So I tell corn growers, soybean growers, wheat producers, hog producers, the hog industry, if you're producing or in an industry that has anything to do with protein, you are in one of the most formidable growth industries of the most recent years. It's been the golden era for U.S. agriculture relative to corn and soybeans. I tell all my cousins who farm in southern Illinois, if you haven't been able to make money the last 2 years, when the guy in the white suit comes, go willingly, he's your friend. It doesn't get much better than that. Now the cycles, I'm a believer in cycles, in life, markets, policy. It's shifting to the meat sector. And it should. Now it's going to be, poultry is going to make so much money the next few years, poultry industry. Just do the math. Lower feed cost. Ability to produce quicker than any other meat. Then hogs, then cattle. Now, to say that it's going to be a profitable industry, I've learned to be very careful on that because of what, again, I speak to a lot of producers, they keep me honest. And I've talked to more than a few lately, said, I'm hit with this PED virus, and I don't know how long I can take it. So even though you can see the sun rising, there's going to be some in your great industry who will not make it because they've been straddled with very high feed cost regulations over the past few years. So I'm careful and mindful. But trade agreements, there was also a Mexican official who said the other day that they're not going to give up any more concessions in trade agreements until they're convinced the U.S. Congress will give President Obama trade promotion authority. That's called fast track, in order to get an agreement approved. So I would watch that issue. A lot of Democrats in the House do not like trade agreements. So your industry has an educational job to try to educate, to say why trade agreements are mostly good. We have a U.S.-EU trade agreement. I'll believe it when I see it. If you've ever negotiated with a European official, you would be jaded. They want. On deficit reduction, I'll have more on that with the chart. Now the economic forecast, because I learned in the 80s, no other way to put it, it was a depression in agriculture. It's like wet cement on my forehead, but I saw many farmers go through. And the young people that I talked to, some of them remembered what happened to their either parents or grandparents who were highly leveraged. The days when Paul Volcker in 1979 put the brakes on inflation and interest rates were 19, 20, and 21. And some of the younger people say, you're kidding me, they weren't that high, were they? Yes. And it's not that the producers, both in the meats and the grain sector, they weren't dumb, they were too highly leveraged. Well, our great industry learned a valuable lesson then and paid down debt. Now, I'll have a chart later on to show it. And so we're well heeled to take a pretty good hit as opposed to other industries. But look around the world. If you think the Federal Reserve is the only central bank, as they're called, to put liquidity into the marketplace, think again. Japan, European Union, and the Bank of England, and these are just bars to prove it. This is they run massive deficits and push debt to unsustainable levels. Europe right now is they go back and forth between a recession, deflation, etc., and it's going to take years to solve their problems. You know, Greece was bankrupt, several years ago. The Greek people suddenly got up one day and said, you mean we have to pay for these entitlement programs? Nobody told us that. Sound familiar? Sooner or later, you got to pay for things. Washington doesn't understand that sometimes. So that also tells me, the Federal Reserve has $4 trillion on their books. For the last few years, they've bought $85 billion a month of securities, mortgage securities, bonds, etc. Now they're starting to what we call taper, reduce, from 85 to 75, and I think they'll make another announcement soon. They'll say 65. They see, this is good news, by the way, they see a little more robust economy coming in the second half of this year and in 2015. Hope they're right. Global economy. When you're in the pork sector, you have to look at the world economy as well as domestic utilization, and that's usually GDP, gross domestic product, economy. And usually you need the world economy growing 3.5% to 4% at least before you can feel good about that export market, and a relatively trading range dollar, because your currency is important. But you can see here, look at that yellow line, that's China, and look at the far left, they weren't hardly under the blip in the 1970s. It's before they came out and became part of the world again. But now advanced economies are picking up the steam again. So those people who were down on America are having to rethink again, as it looks like the U.S. economy is the pillar of strength, and we're even growing at 50% of the rate we usually grow after a recession, let alone a great recession. So there are structural issues going on that's tempering growth. Look at China. Since 2000 to 2010, look at their per capita meat consumption, up 21%, and that's going to go higher. Look on the right side, the crop consumption. Soybeans are up almost 200%. 62% of all of our bean exports go to one country, China. You think it shouldn't be a China watcher? Etc. Now there's pluses and minuses. If they start buying imports, then, or whether it be soybeans or pork, then they'll throw up barriers. They're like Russia. If it gets too sensitive, they'll throw up a phytosanitary reason. But you have to watch China, because that's the one country that's been the factor behind almost many major bull markets for the last 6 years. Their economy came out Monday at 7.7% for 2013. We have them at 7.3% for this year. That's not bad. I mean, the U.S. would sit down and thank God Almighty for a 7% GDP. We'd have a lot higher inflation, though. But if we had half of that, that would be good. But really, you get nervous if China's economy went to 6.5% or lower. That will cause a world recession. Okay? So that's the number I would tell you to watch. Not forecasting that, but you have to know what to watch out for. U.S. economy, bottom line, this is from my CEO, Bruce Scheer. We're going to see more organic growth. That's how economists talk. That means real growth from product sales. Less fiscal drag. The crazies in Washington won't be as crazy. That's my definition. They're going to let it go for a while. Little or no inflation. In fact, the Fed's worried if you really talk to them about deflation, and you don't want deflation. Talk to Japan that went through 2 decades of it. Federal Reserve tapering, I've already explained, but you still have Congress as potentially, putting some mud. Washington has the uncanny ability to screw things up. I don't know what other way to say it. That's my CEO's forecast. He sees 3% growth for the U.S. in this calendar year. Most analysts are at that 2.8%, so he's a little more robust. Look at the business fixed investment, up 6.6%, and he says it actually could go 10%. The reason? Companies have withheld a lot of expenditures the past few years for uncertainty about the healthcare reform or the lack of it, the cost involved with the rolling that out, uncertainty, the interest rate uncertainty, etc. There's over $2 trillion sitting to be invested in the corporations. And the longer you wait to improve your company, the more inefficient you become. So there's a point of no return when companies have to spend. We're there. We're there. So that's, as a stock market participant, I'm staying with this thing because I believe 70% of what I'm telling you. Okay? So I think we're going to make new highs eventually, but it could be into 2015. There's the budget surplus drop that I told you about earlier. We're down, and this is what the White House will tell you. I go to some of their briefings. I can't just usually take them, but I read transcripts, and trust me, it's easier. And 66%, we're making progress, But here's the chart. Look to the right. This goes back to Reagan. Talk about a different president. He's the best one I've ever covered. I'll tell you my truth. I like Clinton, except his foibles. He could have done a lot more. The most intelligent president I ever covered in my long career was Clinton. He could have been a salesman, a preacher, a lot of other things. He didn't need a cue card. Reagan needed a cue card to speak. Good. Obama needs a teleprompter. Bill Clinton doesn't need anything. On almost any subject you throw at him, he's really intelligent. But he could have done more. He could have done more. That's what I fault. But look at the right-hand side. Right now, we're at some lows here as the debt, the U.S. nation's debt as a percent of the economy. Usually economists tell you if you're between 2 and 3% of your nation's economy, that's sustainable. But in the bad days, look where we were. We were at 10, we were down there, we were at 10.1 or more as a percent. That's how bad it was. But look at the out years here, it starts going down again. As a percent, it starts going up, I should say. That's because of the baby boomers I said before. So let me put this other in perspective. The real reason I think the Federal Reserve wants to keep interest rates as low as possible, as long as possible, is what it could do to our servicing the debt. Think about it. We're $17 trillion in debt. We can dig ourselves out of that in a combination. You can't grow yourself out of it anymore like you could have. Not anymore. It's going to take revenue enhancers, that's called tax increases. It's going to take cuts to entitlement programs, Medicare, Social Security. Anybody in this room who's 52 years or younger, in the not too distant future, your Social Security coverage is going to go down, your benefits, and the years in which you're going to first get it is going to go up. That's the only solution, and it'll eventually happen. Now, you see, we settled Social Security in 1 minute here. You know, it'll take them 3 more years to tell you what I just told you, because they'll need political cover. Medicare is a far different issue, because my generation, who closed down college campuses, we know how to use a cane. So we're going to come back at them if they take our entitlements away. So you've got some years of dicey things covering. So don't breathe too fancy when you see, well, it's only these fear mongers. We're only X percent. Okay? Now, the dollar is important for U.S. hog exports. We're on the rise. You don't want too low of a dollar. It was getting too low, actually. But the dollar, I think, my CEO, it's in a trading range, and his conclusion is it's not going to be a major anti-competitive mood for meat exports. So let's hope he's right. But it's still going to have an upward bias. Okay, that's my conclusion there. Farm income, look at that. Although we've had record to near record net cash income aggregately the last few years, that's after expenses, it's going to go down, but it'll still be well above the 10-year average. But the mix is going to be different. The livestock sector is going to have more net than in recent years. That's that cycle change I'm telling you about. That's the balance sheet of agriculture that I alluded to. Look at that. Assets have increased over 40% since 2008. While the debt went up 20%, that's not a bad ratio. But look at in the 1980s that I told you about. That's called depression in agriculture. That chart says it right there. Where at the beginning, farmers were wealthy on paper because of their farmland value, perceived value, and that's when the land just pummeled. So overnight, the farmers lost liquidity. Now, some Iowa land and southeastern, I guess, Minnesota, last time I checked the auctions, they were down 20 to 30% from the highs in 2013. They'll go down another 15% or so, it looks like. Okay? Pork and broiler sector is riding the wave of reduced beef supplies, lower feed costs. You've got the lowest number of cattle since 1952. I remember it. I was in the second grade. I remember it well. Okay. Lower feed cost, etc. I think the issues cycle-wise, I remember in the 70s when there was a beef boycott at supermarkets, the beef got so high. Again, not predicting it, I just know what happened. You know, there's a point of no return on prices. You know? Or has the typical American consumer, do they have offsets now? They may be able to tell Johnny, you know, we're not going to buy you a $160 pair of Nike shoes anymore. We're going to buy steak. You see, I think that's what's going to be happening in the years ahead. Some of the consumers are going to have to readjust because agriculture now is more for the first time in my lifetime, price makers, not price takers. That's a fundamental shift here, which is good for agriculture, I think. What I just said is we still will have a cheap food policy, just not as cheap. Okay? Now, recovery in global grain stocks will require 2 years of large harvest. So you're not out of the woods yet as a consumptive buyer of corn and meal. The stocks of the world major soybean exporters have risen sharply. That's why beans went down 35 cents March yesterday. You were at 12.78, you know? And I looked at the November soybean futures. We probably have another buck to go at least down. But that's going to be a realizing bear market. Once the Argentina and Brazil crop is a given, then you're going to go down for the count. China will start canceling some previous U.S. soybean purchases, and there you go. So there's your outline there. These are USDA numbers from prices just in the wheat, corn, soybeans, meal, rice, and cotton, and you can see we've had some hefty years in the past and what your industry has had to deal with. So talk about innovation until the DDGs got sky high. They helped to a considerable degree, and it got pretty good quality, consistent quality in DDGs. I remember going to outside of Decatur, talked to a big hog producer a couple summers ago, and he told me he saved a really big amount of money from feeding old candy bars. Saved him about $150,000. Now that's called smarts, you know. I wanted to ask him if he took the wrappers off, but I didn't want to look stupid. I don't think they do, but I'm not quite sure. But anyway, this is Acreage. This is not Informa's numbers. We just came out last week, and we're not as down as much for corn acres this year as we were before. But this is, I polled different analysts, and this is what they're seeing. Corn down anywhere from 2 to 4 million acres. Soybeans up 4 to as much as 6 million acres, etc. But those are the two biggies. And I'll make these charts available, you know, to the Iowa Pork Congress so you can study them when you have more time. Improving global economy, peaking ethanol. That doesn't mean the death of ethanol. It means the dramatic growth of ethanol has peaked out. Okay? And on the latest issue on ethanol, where the EPA announced a 13 billion gallon ethanol mandate, well below the legislated mandate of 14.2, there's 3 things I've learned in my writing career that I cannot forecast. Currencies that I talked about before, tax policy, and our court system. The courts are going to have to rule on what EPA did, and I don't know which way they're going to go. But if it's going to change again, it'll come through the courts. But look at this. We've gone through, in the 70s, we had the transition. That was the last go-go years of the grain market. Remember the great American grain robbery of the then Soviet Union? But it was based on cheap credit then. It didn't have legs to it. Then we went back to normalcy. And then in the 2000s, the rise of the rest, the rise of China, the rise of improving the diets. They don't look back. It'll keep going. And that's where the golden era of agriculture began. We didn't know it then, but now we do know. And that doesn't mean you're going to have a golden era every year. It means the trends are going to be there. Now, why effective safety net is needed for your 2 biggest important consumptive products that you buy, a corn producer and a soybean producer. Why do they need an effective safety net? Some potential key market changes that Informa sees in the years ahead, not just this year. In 2015 and 2016, low to perhaps very low prices. We just don't know how low they're going to go because of higher interest rates. Again, we don't know how high, but it's easy to forecast higher interest rates when they're at 0, okay, from the Fed's open market. So, boy, that's a conclusion. However, if the economy goes much more than 3.5%, then they'll probably have to accelerate the tapering, and they're probably going to have to increase the Fed funds rate. How much? So those are those questions that you got to watch out for. Then real interest rate starts going up. Remember when I said the real reason the Fed wants low interest rates? Think about if our interest rates were near normal, whatever normal is, 6-7%. Look at the cost of money to the government to fund our debt right now. That's $17 trillion. That goes to about $800 billion a year, on its way to $1 trillion a year just to service the debt. So where are you at to get EQIP, funding? Where are you at to get a farm bill if that situation were to happen? Just watch out on that. We see a higher U.S. dollar, and that will affect some competitiveness of U.S. exports. It's going to make you have to be more innovative, more efficient. Corn ethanol blend wall will exports, take up. It's like people think, ethanol's gone asunder. No, you're probably going to have 13.5 billion gallons. That's a minimum, by the way. Minimum. And it pays the blenders. The oil blenders are not stupid. They've got just enough greed that makes them good. They're going to blend corn-based ethanol if it pays them to. It's called Math 101. Increased yields. We have been lulled to sleep over the last few years on the, quote, bad weather. You know? It's almost like the Obama campaign in 2012. You know, it could have been worse. You know? Just think of the corn yield you got with the weather we had. And that's what comes to what I go to a lot of meetings. I hope I learn as much as I depart. And I go to the big boy meetings in Monsanto, DuPont, Syngenta. And a couple of years ago, Monsanto bought an equipment company. You remember that? I thought, now that's interesting. Why did they do that? Then I'm starting to see the products. Not pie in the sky. The planters out there now, they've tested it in Illinois, north of Springfield, 90 miles from my hometown, all the way north to the Illinois border, and all of Iowa, where they're testing both corn and soybeans, microscoping that field. And not just the topography. Big data is coming into their databases. But in that equipment, they're proving it. They can do up to 6 different varieties in one field pass. Now, I've interviewed a number of both corn and soybean producers in Illinois and Iowa, and almost all of them told me that helped their yield on their lowest yielding ground. So you're going to see a potential big boost in yields. I know you've heard it before, but now the technology is catching up of that data that's coming in that's unbelievable. So you're going to, if you want a lot more corn, you're going to get it. Okay? That's what I just said. So increased yields. And God forbid we ever have anything good normal weather. Ooh, you're going to see the productive might of that corn crop again. Too many people lulled to sleep. Lower prices depends on the carryover buildups and what China does. Will China come in if we have much under $4 and start scooping up a lot of corn to build up their inventory? So while corn may go under 4, how long will it stay under 4? Because China is a good trader. T-R-A-D-E-R. Okay? Watch them. Barometers watch farm equipment sales or the lack thereof and land values. This is what I've learned as an investor over the years. Those big boys that I told you about, that I go to their meetings, they go, well, that equipment depreciation is gone now. The big, we can't write it off as fast. Plus, if that corn price goes as low as y'all are saying, I'm not going to buy that new combine every year or the new planter. That's my hedge. I'm hearing that from the sharpest farmers who are far smarter than I am. And I'm going to look at equipment sales. And it's starting to show up. Okay? Land values are showing the same thing. They're starting to go down. And those people who bought $18,000, $20,000 per acre land, they ain't going to get $6 corn. So you're going to see some consequences there. Now, Farm Bill. And then I want to open it up to some questions. I picked this chart by purpose because of some people have Farm Bill fatigue. I have Farm Bill nausea. It's just been horrible to watch. Okay? The lobbyist, I have never seen as bad lobbying by some groups in Washington. I will tell you this. Tell them I said it. I can't speak for Informa or ProFarmer. I'll speak for myself. This is what I'm hearing from lawmakers of how certain groups who some corn grower groups say, well, they call it the I-State Corn Growers Association. Now, your Iowa Corn Growers Association is right on. I would fight for exactly what they're doing. Illinois, same thing. National? Not quite so sure. This is what I'm hearing. Okay? Interesting things going on. Why am I saying this? Did they ask for too much? Yes. Why? A female lawmaker a couple years ago saw me up on Capitol Hill. Frankly, I think the more you're up there, the worse off you are. You'll just get confused. But she saw me and she said, Jim, you've been covering agriculture for a long time. I said, yeah, all great men are dead and I'm not well myself. Okay? So she goes, there's something I don't understand and I want to talk to you about it. Now, when a lawmaker tells you that, They understand. They want to prove a point. So you sit down and do something what most Washingtonians don't do. You listen. And she went through and she asked me a series of questions. She said, haven't farmers, especially corn and soybeans, have record to near record net cash income the last few years? Yeah. Don't we have record to near record farmland values? Yeah. And don't we have a pretty good crop insurance program where they subsidize over 62% of a buy-up policy? Yes. Well, then tell me one thing. What do they mean when they say shallow loss payment program? That's what the corn and soybeans national groups proposed. Bad name. Think about it. Lesson I first learned when I first came to Washington, you need, as a grain producer, you need farm programs not when prices are good. It's when they're bad. You need help as a meat industry when you have Russia changing their tune every other day on ractopamine, right? That's when you need it, when you got a problem, not when you're making record farm income. You see what I'm telling you? They do not, they have gotten so much, so fast, certain groups. Biodiesel tax, incentive if you're for it, subsidy if you're against. You know, I'm a writer. Words are important. So if somebody says it's a subsidy, they're against it. They call it an incentive, they're getting money. Okay? Ethanol, mandate. That's not a subsidy. Tell me when you mandate I'm not saying it's bad policy, but when you mandate X number of bushels to be forced into a commodity, there's two mega changes in my career in agriculture that made a fundamental difference. The corn ethanol mandate changed the world, made corn king, and two, the development of crop insurance as the best risk management tool for a grain producer. And now both are in the changing area because they went too far, too fast. So, look at all this timeline. We're in the 5th calendar year of a 5-year farm bill. This is true. It started in 2010 hearings by Peterson. You think that, I think I'm not tired. This is about going as long as Downton Abbey. I'm tired of it. Now, Farm Bill dairy policy. It always made me, I hope a lot of your politicians can go to, confession. When some of them said, it's not dairy, it's all these other issues that's stopping the farm. No, it was dairy. And they've settled it. The reason why you haven't got an announcement from farm state law, it's done. All except cool and pay caps, but that's going to be decided in a telephone conversation probably Friday or Saturday this week. Dairy policy. You had a battle between a House Ag Committee ranking member, Colin Peterson, a good guy. You always like him as a journalist, somebody who talks out loud, okay? And he changes about every other day, so you got to quote him. He was for supply management for dairy. I've never seen a supply management program work, by the way, in my 36 years. Think of acreage reduction control programs for corn. Remember those days? By law, you can't even have them anymore. But he wanted supply management because he was afraid this gross margin revenue coverage that dairy's going to get, and it's good, it's needed. Your dairy brethren is going to have an effective program for them as a risk management tool. It's going to work. But Colin was afraid, oh my goodness, it might be so good, the expenditures are going to blossom, and we're going to get in trouble because people are going to point fingers. Wall Street Journal, surprise, surprise. It's going to be anti-dairy policy. So, he wanted supply management. House Speaker John Boehner, Speaker of the House, he may not be able to control the cats in his own party, okay, the conservative, but he can control agriculture because he decides when a bill comes onto the House floor. That's what Colin Peterson forgot, and that's what even Chairman Lucas, Republican from Oklahoma, forgot for a while until it was told to him. Who do you think, why do you think you're chairman? Now, here's what they're going to announce in a couple of weeks. The authority for the Ag Secretary to annually adjust the premium paid to those dairy producers by plus or minus 5%. And it's going to have a gross margin insurance indemnification program when a producer exceeds their historical base. We're going to have a base production, the full payment on the historical production, and a lower payout. If you want to go beyond your base, then you get a lower payment. That's what they'll announce in a couple of weeks, I think. Other quick issues. Country of origin labeling, they still haven't decided this. It started in 2002 Farm Bill. If you're against country of origin labeling, you have your own sum of your own lobbyists to fault because they didn't give it the look at in 2002. They didn't think it was going to happen. They were wrong. Now, Canada and Mexico has a case against another case against our program. The WTO, World Trade Organization, is going to rule in February or March of this year. And many people tell me it could go against the United States again. They're ready to retaliate. Canada over $1 billion. Now you tell me if a meat processor wants that to happen. Okay, and it won't just be agriculture. That's why you have other companies in the United States starting to call the White House now. Now, President Obama is going to go to Mexico February the 19th for a North American summit. Little White House source I have said, you know, we want this issue off the table by then because Obama doesn't want the Mexicans and the Canadians preaching to him about this cool program. So that's an interesting line, isn't it? As we speak, they're negotiating to change the country of origin labeling program that Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack, who charitably, I will say, has been the most unusual secretary I've covered in my career. He's not dumb. He's very smart. However, he's just unusual. I'll leave it at that. He reads, well, he's like the White House. He reads anything he wants into language. He's a lawyer. Okay? Congress knows that now, so they're not going to give him flexibility. The latest I hear is it could be a modified North American label. Now, what's that mean? With no U.S. origin on it. That, I think, would be amenable. I'm going up to Canada. I'm going to ask them. I think that would be amenable. It's not the most perfect thing. Then you have some of the meat industry saying, you know, they're using USDA's data right against them, saying country of origin labeling, it's in a USDA fact sheet, by the way, it's not a food safety issue. So the courts are involved on this one now, too. So I think you're going to see something close to this North American label. Repeal is, and I know there's some producers who say, we need this thing. Well, I don't agree. Repeal would probably be the best thing, but it probably won't happen. The Farmers Union apparently, reportedly, has told their favorite lawmakers, including Vilsack in the White House, that they're going to come out against the Farm Bill if that North American label is in it. I don't think that'll matter much. This Farm Bill is going to be passed. Whenever you spend $1 trillion on a bill, and the Farm Bill is that, 82%, by the way, on food stamps over 10 years, okay? You still have a Congress who loves to spend money. It'll pass. Oh, you'll have people say, oh, are the votes there? Are the votes? Anything can pass the Senate. It's the House, and I think they're tired of it. They just want it done. So that's my Farm Bill, and I did want to go into, well, budgets say, they'll say it's going to say 25 to 30 billion over 10 years. Boy, that's a laugher. I want to see what years they're saving the money. It's usually the last 5 years of a 10-year baseline. And remember, the Farm Bill is only 5 years. So these are the games your government plays, both parties. Okay. Then I want to see the price assumptions they used to come up with those savings. They're probably too high on corn and soybean prices. Okay. They won't know what hit them for the next few years in taxpayers' outlays to corn and soybean people. Undersecretary of Trade is in the bill. Usually I would vote against, I would tell you to go against any new government employee. That's just me. I've learned that. Fewer the better. You know, Reagan. The problem isn't. The problem is government. You know, but you still need some government. Okay. This is needed because our trade policy, especially in agriculture, is about 9th on a list of 9 items. Okay. You need an Aggie sitting at the table to fight against the State Department, who usually, from a geopolitical reason, is for the country, the other country. Okay? And we have a far different industry right now than it was the last time in 1978 when USDA's trade, Foreign Ag Service, was reorganized. We've gone from bulk shipments to value added, meats. So you need a different type of a system. So that's a good positive development. Duration, it's going to cover crop years 2014 to 2018. The corn and soybean people are going to be given a choice to either go revenue assurance, shallow loss, or a target price system for the South. Read that, rice and peanuts. They're going to have the ability to reallocate their base. Now that doesn't mean, I've been schooled, I've been yelled at by these people who are writing this legislation. Don't call it a base update. They're going to be able to reallocate their base based on actual plantings from 2009 to 2012. Simple example, say it's going to affect wheat the most. Say you had a 100-acre wheat base, and you used to plant all wheat, but soybeans are pretty good right now, and in those years you planted 50 acres each year of soybeans. They'll be able to reallocate and get a soybean base, and they'll have fewer wheat acre base. So you're going to see wheat base acres go down. That's what it tells me. Cotton always has a separate program. They're going from Title I to a crop insurance program for many reasons. Because Brazil challenged us in the WTO and won. And I think some of the farm program things that they're going to do, we're going to be challenged in the years ahead, and we're probably going to lose those. And we're going to have to change the grain crop subsidy program, because I think it could actually distort acres in bad crop years. Cotton will have no payment cap because it's going to be a crop insurance program now. There's no payment caps for crop insurance. So the big boys are going to come back into the cotton program, and the cotton farmers are going to have an annual determination each year of what they want to do with their cotton base. That base reallocation I told you about is a one-time only choice that they'll have to make this year. Cotton will have it every year. If they don't want to grow cotton, they can grow any other crop and then get the safety net features of that particular crop. I'm not going to go through all this. Conservation Reserve Program, the maximum is going to be lowered to 24 million acres, and that's good policy. Because the acres now, it's truly more and more truly fragile acres. When that program first started in '85, I think, it was a grain supply management program. So it wasn't a conservation program. So now it's a program that it was meant to be fragile acres. Environmental Quality Incentive Program, a program that does your industry very good. They're cherry picking it. $300 to $400 million cut in the last appropriations bill. That's not a good development. I went the wrong way. I'll look at elections, and I do want to take some time for some quick questions. I'm very good friends with Charlie Cook and David Wasserman. I don't know whether you watch CNN. I don't have the stomach, but I know he's on it. He's an election year expert. He's from Louisiana. I'm from Illinois. First time he met me, he said, "Jim, at least in Louisiana, we don't have to come out of our grave to vote like you all do." So I knew he had a sense of humor, and that's usually half the battle of being a human being. 2014 Congress, the House, very unlikely that the Democrats will find the 17 votes needed to regain control. The Senate, Charlie expertly says the Republicans need a net gain of 6 seats to regain control of the Senate. His prediction is between 4 and 6, and I told him he could be a commodity analyst. He's going to be right anyway. He's pretty smart. President, I'm even going to give you an inside look of some of the presidential candidates. What's the election going to be about this year? We don't know. Blurred Lines. That's a song, by the way. I used to be a reviewer of songs and movies in my golden era of the 1970s. I interviewed the Rolling Stones when they were young, by the way. Ooh. There's very few competitive races in the House. That's what that chart says. They've gerrymandered both political parties. They're talking to themselves. That's why they don't have to talk to the other side anymore. They're not there. They're not there. They've gerrymandered the districts. Both political parties. That's not a good development, by the way. So his prediction, minimal, single-digit change. The Republicans could actually gain a few seats, or the Democrats could win 6 to 8. They need 17. So again, high odds, No fundamental leadership change. The Senate, his outlook, I told you, was 4-6. The key states are right here. Montana, Baucus is not running. He's going to be the U.S. ambassador to China. Montana's hard to call. It's like the North Dakota election. They're a conservative state. But I learned a long time ago, trust me, I came from Fargo earlier this week. -17 real. If that doesn't do anything but build character, I don't know what does, okay? This is warm compared to Fargo, okay? And I go there every year for the last 12 years in North Dakota. And in the last election, Heidi Heitkamp, the Democrat, ran against Rick Berg, and I came back, and I bet 2 Washington-oriented people who were from North Dakota who thought it was going to be Rick Berg. They hadn't been back to the state. You have to talk the talk and walk the walk. And she did, he didn't. But Montana is just like North Dakota, hard to call, even though they're a conservative state. South Dakota, Johnson, trust me, that's going to go from Democrat to Republican. Then you have West Virginia, Rockefeller, a Democrat, think coal. And do you think a voter in West Virginia is going to be friendly to any Democrat after the Obama administration? They want to dig coal into the ground. Think about that. No, that's a pickup. Bajik in Alaska, again, maybe 51 or 49. I can't say 50-50. Very close. Pryor, Arkansas. Yeah, he's a Democrat. Arkansas is increasingly turning Republican. So that should be a pickup for the Republicans. Landrieu, Louisiana, is a Democrat. I'll take bets on here. She's a good campaigner. So somebody's going to have to prove to me that she's going to lose. Hagan. Here's the one you watch election night. Democrat from North Carolina. If Hagan loses, then at least the Republicans have a chance to win the Senate. If she wins, go to happy hour. Because there's no way the Republicans can regain the Senate if they don't get Hagan's seat. It's as simple as that. Kentucky, the minority leader. I think he'll win, but it's going to be close. They're putting all the money against him. But I think he'll win. Mitch McConnell. He's got a primary and he's got a formidable candidate in the election. President, I asked Charlie and Dave Wasserman, his cohort, to put together on the Republican side who can win, who can't win, and maybes. The can wins, now this was before Chris Christie's, let's say, transportation problems, okay? And Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio. He's the Obama of the Republican Party. And cryptically, I may add, his parents actually wanted to come to this country rather than leave it. Think about that. Jeb Bush is probably the Bush who should have ran, but didn't. He's the real smarter one. Not that George W. was dumb, he wasn't. Just listened to Cheney too much. Chris Christie is the reason I recently lost 45 pounds. Because I've always said in the past I wanted a fat president. And you'll recall he, in February last year, he announced that he was having lap band surgery. And I said, I'll be dang if he's going to be thinner than me. You know. So he's got a certain spot, okay, in my heart, in my stomach, literally. But I still drink your crops. Can't wins, cannot. Ted Cruz, okay, he's the Trump of Congress. You know, just all... You know, he's never seen a camera he didn't like. Rand Paul, he's actually looking pretty smart lately. So I don't know. I'm going to ask Charlie about him. And Rick Santorum, once Americans pass you by, they don't usually give you another chance. The Republicans don't quite understand that. The maybes, Scott Walker from Wisconsin. Paul Ryan, I don't think he wants it now. And Thune from South Dakota. At least these were their picks. Okay? There's one state. Now, the person I told, don't answer it. Dave Wasserman said there's one state, assuming the Republicans win Florida and Ohio. Ohio's, I think, a safe assumption. Florida is really changing as more New York and New Jersey people retire and they go to Florida. Well, how do they vote? And but let's just give Florida to the Republicans. There's one state that the Republicans don't usually win, that Dave Wasserman says they have to win to get the White House. What state do you think that is? Huh? No, Iowa, that's not enough. Not enough votes. It's Pennsylvania. Watch the duke out in Pennsylvania this coming election. And that's why they tell me Scott Walker could be winnable. The conservatives like Scott Walker. They don't really like Chris Christie. He could win, but he's not as charismatic as these other people. You need a 60-second soundbite. The Democrats, I picked that picture. The Democrats may be lacking in new blood come 2016. Think about it. So it's cool. Now, people have underestimated Hillary the last few years. She's pretty smart. And she's a woman who's made it in sexist Washington, I will tell you that. Okay? But she's not Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was moderate. Hillary's liberal. Big difference. So they're going to probably sell her Bill Clinton too. No way, no how. Now, if she doesn't take it, or Joe Biden, who? Cuomo from New York. If you want a liberal, go for Cuomo. O'Malley is from Baltimore, my area. He's a pretty good lawmaker, you know, governor. Warner from my home state now, Virginia. Hickenlooper out of Colorado. Gillibrand, an up-and-coming female senator from New York. She's on the rise, watch her. And Elizabeth Warren, because she says she doesn't want to be president, which usually means you do. Now, my last chart. There's one county since 1956, only one out of all the counties, that's accurately voted for every president since 1956. I'm going to give it to you now, and it probably won't work, but these are the things I look for so I can go to happy hour on election night, okay? And it's Vigo County, Indiana. And they close early. Polls close early. So watch how Vigo votes, and look how they voted. Now, it didn't turn out that close, but Obama barely won. So remember Vigo County.